We will make Beirut like Gaza or Beirut the second Gaza. This is how the Israeli Minister of War announced what is going on at the head of the right-wing government of which he is a part and who is close to the Lebanese border. After this video, you will know, my dear, why Hezbollah is trembling and why Iran behind him is trembling. Why is the Houthi on alert with 2 or more missiles? How did they all swallow the double-edged razor? And they left Gaza alone, knowing very well what Israel intends to do. When America rushed to the region with its carriers, submarines, planes, soldiers, and even nuclear weapons? This report contains more explanation and detail. Before we mention Israel or Hezbollah, we will talk a little about the United States, which many believe is one of the 2 sides in the war on Gaza, along with Israel. The truth is that it is, and the evidence is many and everyone has understood it. But this is not what we want to inform you of, and as we said, it is known. But about another matter that some may think America has overlooked. It is its major conflict with China. Here too we will put aside Russia. What has become established now is that America does not take into account anyone except China. This giant has grown and has become a threat to the American throne. We can list for you a lot of evidence of the depth and climax of the conflict, which led some to predict that Washington and Beijing were on the verge of a world war. The beginning of the Aquas Pact, which included the alliance of English-speaking countries, and its declared goal was to encircle China from Australia, then what America did in allowing Japan to rebuild its army, as well as preparing the South Koreans and Taiwan, which Washington declared a red line. Between this and that, the Americans withdraw from Afghanistan, China's neighbor, to confuse the Chinese with the return of the Taliban. Before that, the Uyghur issue, which was brought about by Washington and the hosting of the Americans to oppose Tibet, and these are Chinese territories. Their goal is to annoy the dragon. Between these and that is an economic war launched by the Americans against Chinese companies, and the list goes on. What we are interested in is to prove that there is a war going on between the 2 parties, the last chapter of which was a road war between the 2 giants. As Beijing seeks to inaugurate the road called the Silk Road to strangle the world, Washington decided to respond to it with another way that would block this path. Here we reach the horse's link, as they say, Israel, Gaza, and Iran, with the subordination of Hezbollah. Get ready now for the important part of this episode, which is a new round of the American war on China and on those who think of competing with the Americans. Let us open a parenthesis and mention that after its withdrawal from Afghanistan, Washington has nothing left in Central Asia except Pakistan and India. The rest of the Central Asian countries are in alliances with China and Russia, and let us remember all that happened to Imran Khan, Prime Minister of Pakistan. When he thought of inciting the Americans and opening the doors of his country to the Russians and Chinese, Pakistan is now on the brink of internal war, and many of you have followed the series of trials of Imran Khan and his supporters. And if you think that Imran is fighting alone, correct your information, as he is supported by Beijing and Moscow. Therefore, the issue of liquidating him was delayed or became difficult, and all the Americans could do was imprison him or get rid of him in a less bloody way. Why did he mention Pakistan? To understand that America is no longer improving its grip on this large and powerful country, militarily and nuclear. Even in India, Washington does not have complete control over the initiative. Elephant Country sees itself as a new, rising giant. Loyalties conflict between Moscow and Washington, without forgetting that it is one of the pillars of BRICS, along with China, which is hostile to it. But Russia managed to subjugate part of India. Speaking of BRICS, this is a new organization for which Washington does not want success or success. It came out to compete with its alliance with the Europeans. Let us reconsider the matter again. What remains for the Americans is the Middle East. After Africa seemed closer to the camp of the Russians and Chinese. Washington will not accept to lose the Middle East to the Chinese, no matter what happens. It is the link and key in the middle of the world. And for all the world. But what hinders America in the Middle East is Iran, Iran's minions, and its trusted allies. The talk here is about Hezbollah, the Assad regime, Iraq, and the Houthis in Yemen. Hamas and Jihad in Palestine. These are the axis of Iran, and their dependency on China and Russia and their close relationship are known. Tehran owes its survival to Moscow and Beijing more than others. So you see her entering to fight with the Russians in Ukraine. You see it receiving China's military buildups and conducting maneuvers with them in the heart of the Gulf. This is what the Gulf Arabs took notice of. And it seemed as a result. How could BRICS and Saudi Arabia in Shanghai and agreements between the two parties worth billions come to a close, if China was on the verge of swallowing up the Middle East? And this is what we said Washington would not accept. So it was October 7th and I saw how the Americans were defending the region as if the war was against them and belonged to them and not to Israel. Israel's stated goals are to eliminate Hamas and even empty Gaza, and Washington behind it is to finance and protect Tel Aviv, its losses, and what it has paid so far. America told it to go ahead and do not care, and we will compensate you if it is an American war, not only against Hamas, but against everyone who will block its path. Which way are we talking about? The American Silk Road, which leads to southern Europe and reaches the port of Haifa in Israel. Then it makes its way to Saudi Arabia and Dubai, and from there to the Indian port of Manbale. This path is economic, as in the plan, but it is more political and strategic. The Americans do not want obstacles in their way. In their view, it is time to pave the road. Consequently, without Hezbollah, here we tell you how the Israelis and certainly the Americans think. Here too, you will understand why Hezbollah did not enter the war line and left Gaza alone, and why Iran abandoned the road to Jerusalem. You will remember Hezbollah's equation that if Israel invades Gaza, it will invade the Galilee. This is now a thing of the past. The party and Tehran now realize that Tel Aviv and Washington want an excuse to eliminate Hezbollah and all of Iran's arms. In their view, Hamas gave them this pretext, so they continued. Now they are waiting for the party. He is fully aware of the plan, so you see him trembling and neither he nor Iran will enter and interfere. Implementing what their Minister of War pledged, who said he was waiting for Beirut, is what happened in Gaza. Then comes the question, what if the party does not give a reason to Israel and completely abandons Hamas? Certainly, the American ambition does not stop here. They have a plan and an alternative to it, and perhaps many alternatives. And here, let us tell you how Washington began to deal with Iran's increasing influence in the region. Here is the news that came out about new relations between the Americans and the Arab tribes in eastern Syria and western Iraq. We tell you that these tribes have almost armed themselves and are ready to cut off the Iranians. And so are the Kurds. If it is America's endeavor, it is to trim the nails of the Iranians and, of course, the Chinese behind them. A look at Lebanon, a country, an entity that is suffering greatly economically and has been abandoned by everyone. It may be left to become a failed country. This does not harm the Americans. If Hezbollah, which chose to leave Hamas alone, should know that this will not protect it, say the Americans and Israelis. He is the next bull that Washington will overthrow if Hamas is overthrown. We conclude with a quote from Joe Biden. Who is to justify his support for the Israelis? He said that future generations in America will realize the importance of this decision, as it will be their insurance for whom? For the Americans, and certainly Hamas is not the danger to the Americans, and Hezbollah is not, and even Iran is not known. What is the danger? He's a dragon. Washington does not want to be consumed by its fire, no matter what happens.